Thanks for tuning in to another episode of One More Story. Parents, if you would like to skip ahead to the first story, you can find it at the 11-minute, 10-second mark. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review or reach out to us on social media. You can find us at One More Story Podcast. So kick back, relax, and enjoy tonight's episode. Welcome to One More Story. My guest tonight is PARVESH CHEENA, an incredibly talented, hilarious, and luxuriously bearded actor, producer, writer, and according to my kids, a Ravens World scene stealer. Parv, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Pete. How have you been?
I've been good. It's good to see you. I feel like it's been quite some time.
Yes, we did a film back in the early 2000s, or was it the mid 2000s at this point?
I don't know. It's all a blur. But we didn't actually have any scenes together. You just tormented me over the phone, I believe.
Yeah, it was the first of a few of the call center projects that I've been a part of. And that was a very fun one.
It was a blast to do. And then the other call center project was a hit show, wasn't it?
I had a good time with Outsourced. I turned 30, I got my first series regular, and it was just a really good show to be on with a bunch of other friends who looked like me and looked like my family.
So was Barbershop your first sort of big movie that you did, or how did you came up through Chicago, like you did theater in Chicago, right?
Yeah, and Barbershop was just an audition that I went out as we do. We go out for every audition in our early 20s for every project, everything. And I was lucky to just grab that, be a local hire. I worked in Chicago. I was going to college in Chicago. And that was just a very exciting and different thing. It was a lot different than just going to movement or Shakespeare class that week.
I can imagine. And then did you move out here immediately afterwards?
No, I waited a couple years. I was scared. I didn't want to leave my family yet. So I stayed in Chicago and worked in theater. And then I did the sequel, Barbershop 2. And then when that was coming out, that's when I was like, all right, maybe I should go to LA if you got to play the same role in two films before age 24. So that was the world or the universe kind of saying like, okay, you can go to LA now. But I do, if I remember, like sometimes I wonder if I had gone after the first film, but that was my path. I stayed a couple of years and then I happily moved. I remember the one and only time I've driven cross country from Chicago to LA in 2004.
And then how was it? How was that transition when you came out here? Did you immediately start working, or you tell us a little bit about that?
Your first few years in LA are just kind of exciting. Aren't you just going out, learning like where the cheap restaurants are, where you can get the cheap Indian lunch or the cheap Thai lunch on Mondays? So it's kind of a blur because there was a lot of classes. I took a lot of improv and sketch at like Second City, an Improv Olympic, Groundlings, UCB even. And I remember like in commercials, a couple of recurring gigs here, there. Like I remember just being grateful I paid my bills, but I also tutored and babysat and dog sat for people. But it was fun. It was a very fun time. And then outsourced I got literally around like age 30, 31 in between. And then it kind of became like a different life. But that's how I defined my 20s to my 30s in that sense.
So you're obviously very busy. You did a voice on Mandalorian, right?
Yeah, I was a droid.
That's amazing. Were you a big Star Wars fan growing up?
Sure, like in the sense that the first three prequels, those came out when I was in college. So the Phantom Menace,
Right.
Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, right? And then
Yes.
I didn't. When you look back, they weren't that great. They weren't that great, and it was just weird because we had such a build up, and then we figured like aren't we supposed to see these movies like 2-3 times? Isn't this what our parents did? So we did. And then by the third one, I would just remember like, or the second one, I remember like when Padme and Hayden Christensen, Anakin, are like rolling in like the hills. I'm like, what is this? It was very interesting, but I do love the more recent ones. And so enough of like a nerd where I have a few shirts, and but not enough that, oh, the one of the rides was down at Disneyland.
Hmm.
Well, we'll go next time. We didn't like throw a fit and demand our money back or anything. We're like, oh, okay, we'll go on a different ride now. Teacups, everybody. Like it's not the end of the world in that regard.
Well, you're an adult.
That's the thing. And I look back at the nostalgia. My biggest nostalgia were like Ewoks. And then when you got older, then they're like, no, Ewoks aren't cool. I'm like, what? When did that happen? I love the Ewoks.
I had the Ewok village when I was a kid. I was obsessed with the Ewoks.
See? And then I did remember watching, I think they had The Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi in like a Jewel or Dominic's grocery
Okay.
on a screen. I think like literally to corral children. And this is in like the mid 80s. But like just so
That's
you could like
hilarious.
leave your kids there watching Star Wars while you shopped. So I remember my brother and I watched it.
I love that. So when you were a kid, were there any particular stories you enjoyed growing up, or how did you quiet your mind, wind things down?
When I was a big reader, and that was, in the days before smartphones and even just the internet. Like if you wanted to go to bed, you would just bring in all your library books or your comic books. I'm still I know I kind of gave up on comic books, but comics were my big thing too. I would like even like hang over the bed, have my books like flat, like, on your stomach, just reading, like say like the newspaper. You could flip it. You didn't have to hold like a big comic or a big book up. And I would read, and then like apparently that's just like how my family would find me asleep, just like dangling over my bed with like a book or just book in bed. Like it was never the best in terms of a specific story that I would make up or that I would go to bed with. Because I also started, maybe this is something about immigrant children where we just read from a very young age. I remember my grandma, my nanny, whenever she'd visit from India, I thought this was just normal. Like I had to practice like writing A, B, 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 C, C, C. But I was like 2, maybe 3. So I just, oh, okay, that's what you had to do before you could go outside and play. So I remember I started reading from such a young age. So it was such a part of my life. One of the first, how like in kindergarten or first grade, you get like one of those tasks like the hall monitor or like the door opener or the teacher
Hmm.
reminder to erase the chalkboard or person. So I remember like I got storyteller and she had to like make up that job because I could read while she probably like was like grading papers or writing notes to the 5th grade teacher or something.
And then what about now? Life can be stressful, hectic as an
Now
adult.
now I fall asleep with my hand curled around my iPhone in a grip of arthritis and pain, and it's a light that is like causing like a blue light box on my face that's going to be like the reverse version of a suntan or sunburn. It's an iPhone Blu-ray face burn, and I've learned how to scroll with my left hand instead of my right
Oh
because
my
my right
God.
thumb is starting to hurt. And I know it's for good sleep hygiene that you should turn off all your devices, put them in a different room. If not, not on your nightstand or bedstand or close to your bed, but locked in a box in a closet on a timer that won't open for 8 hours. But I don't know where that box is. I misplaced it.
So you're in the death grip of doom scrolling prior to sleep.
Yeah, and that's not very healthy. But
No, it's not.
but what I did even last night, like just because I just wanted to try this. I'm a big fan of yoga and in general just stretching. It's just stretching. I'm stretching my hamstrings, I'm stretching my back, my shoulders. So I do know that I couldn't sleep as well last night. A mix of allergies, mix of we have family visiting, so the house is up in a ruckus right now. But I did a little stretching and yoga, and that put me right back to a sleepy state and right back to bed.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I think I need to try that.
Well, especially it wasn't like I didn't do like treadmill, or I didn't like start doing
Well,
like
yeah.
kickboxing, or an
Tybo.
HIIT, a hit interval. What is that? High intensity interval training. None of that. I
Oh
just did
man.
some light stretching.
No, that's to wake you up in the morning.
Yeah.
That's
I
to
actually like
get
doing
things
the
going.
senior yoga. The yoga that if I can do it with my mom, that's the perfect amount for me. Is there a chair involved? Then I'll be fine. I can do this yoga.
Well, very cool. Well, are you ready to just dive in here?
Yes, it's time to go to bed.
Speaking of being glued to devices, the word is iPad.
iPad.
Once upon a time, there was a little boy named Derek, and Derek was addicted to his iPad. He would get up early. His parents would keep the iPad. Well, they thought they were keeping it in a spot where Derek wouldn't find it, in the middle of the night. But somehow it was like this thing had a power over him, and he could always find it. So he was sleeping very poorly, always on his iPad. He was watching, I don't know, YouTube shorts and cat videos and just all sorts of random things, like people opening packages, unboxing videos. And, it was affecting his sleep. It was affecting his schoolwork. It was even affecting his moods. And whenever his parents would take it away, he would get cranky. And it was just kind of a miserable existence. And they didn't know what to do because his parents were afraid to just ban the iPad altogether, because if they did that, then they didn't know how he would react. His parents were walking on the eggshells a little bit around young Derek and his unhealthy relationship to his iPad. So they decided, they had some friends who had sent their child to a summer camp that was a device-free summer camp. And so they decided that they were going to send Derek to Camp Luddite, is what it was called, where there were no devices, very little technology. It was pretty much almost an Amish way of life, very peaceful. So one day at breakfast, they approached Derek and told him, "Derek, we are sending you to camp."
Derek took one look at his parents and was like, "I'm ready. It's time." Derek's parents were a little taken aback and kind of surprised by this reaction. Their kid, who's never without their iPad, is just agreeing to go to Luddite camp, a place where you try to end your use of devices. But Derek was of a different generation than his parents. He realized that, always being on a device, constantly engaged with just yourself instead of your imagination, or maybe your friends, might not be the best way to continue going on. Besides, Derek was only 12. He wasn't even a teenager yet. So Derek packed up his belongings, his clothes, his toothbrush, as well as 2 pairs of shoes, because he had heard that there had been some activities that you do at this camp outside. Kind of like sports, but not like sports. Activities. And as Derek approached Luddite camp, a big sign over an entrance to a forest with a bunch of camp tables and tents and activities like pool. Oh, and beanbag toss. And what's that? A little building in the corner that says the word library. Wait, library? Yes, Derek. Someone told Derek that that was a library. A place where you read books. Derek, after settling into Luddite camp, took 1 foot in front of another and approached the library. How do you say it again? Library, Derek. he had approached the library. Inside, he found book after book. You know, it's those things that on an iPad you would touch your finger to and magically there'd be another page. Well, in the real world, they're made out of paper that comes from trees. And that is bound together in a book that was made in a printing press. But I'm going into the history of books. Right now, it's about Derek discovering that these books have ideas and stories that would fill his imagination better than any iPad could. Well, truth be told, you can read books on an iPad, but I'm digressing. This is about Derek finding his imagination.
So as he entered the library and he looked around and he saw all of these books, these different colored books everywhere, he was blown away. And some of the spines of the books were bright red, some were multicolored, some were just black and brown. It was every color you could imagine. He'd never seen anything like it. And immediately, the librarian named Mrs. Reader approached him. And she said, "Hello, young man. What's your name?" And he said, "Well, my name's Derek." And she's like, "Well, what brings you to the library here at Camp Luddite?" And he said, "Well, my parents think I have an unhealthy relationship with my screen, with my iPad, and, you know, I'm mature enough to recognize that they may be right, and that's why I'm here, and I've never been to a library." How do you say that?
Library, Derek.
Thank you. "And this is amazing." And she said, "Well, what are you interested in besides your iPad?" And I'm assuming looking at TikTok videos and unboxing videos and YouTube shorts and things like that. What are the things that interest you outside of that little rectangle? And they said, "Well, I heard that you guys have activities here, and that's why I brought an extra pair of shoes. And, you know, maybe I could read some books on some activities that might be interested." She said, "Oh, well, Derek, I have just the section for you." So she led him down a long aisle past tons and tons of books into one section that said activities. And they had books on hopscotch. They had books on candle making. They had books on woodworking. They had books on throwing dice. They had books on just skipping. They had an entire section of books devoted to the lost art of skipping. And he said, "Oh, I've never even heard of half of these things, but hopscotch has a cool ring to it. Like, yeah, can I look at this book on hopscotch?" She said, "Well, of course." So she pulled out an encyclopedia of the history of hopscotch, and she handed it to Derek.
After just a few weeks at Luddite camp, let's be honest, it only takes a few weeks to recover your imagination. Derek had become an expert on hopscotch, but even more so, he had discovered his imagination and now realized that there was a world of activities that were not tied to just your screen time on an iPad. Back home, Derek's parents were really happy. They did new things like hopscotch as a family, or getting fireflies in a glass jar, but we put the screen on top so the fireflies can breathe, while playing hopscotch together as a family. Derek and his parents were really happy, and as his 13th birthday approached, Derek asked his parents, "Listen, as a teenager, I think I should get 4 hours of screen time a night." "Just kidding, Mom and Dad. Let's go play hopscotch."
The end. Parvesh, are you ready for your solo story?
Yeah.
The word, oh, it's a good one. Perfect for bedtime. The word is dream. Dream.
Every night before one kid goes to bed, and by kid, I mean put yourself into this. You're the kid. Listen, every night a kid is supposed to have good dreams, right? Right? But what if you don't? There's a word for those dreams. Yeah, I know you're going to say nightmare, but that's not true. Yes, nightmares exist. They're bad and they're scary, but that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about what happens when you don't have a good dream, but you don't have a bad dream. You just have a dream. This happened to this one kid. Yes, it's still kind of you in this story, but for this time, we're going to give this kid a name. Randy was a kid, 8 years old, lived in Wheattown, Illinois. You know, it was Wheattown because they grew a lot of corn. No, I'm kidding. It was wheat. Wheattown grew a lot of wheat. And Randy lived there with his family, and his family was fine. They were great. They were wonderful. They were supportive. But Randy still wondered why he wouldn't always have a good dream, and sometimes he'd have a bad dream. Remember the nightmares. But what happened when he just had a dream that was just a dream? And Randy was a kid who was a dreamer. See, there's more than one kind of dream. You have the dreams you have when you fall asleep at night, and you also have the dreams that you have when you're awake. Daydreams. Randy was a daydreamer and dreamed about things that he wanted to do when he was growing up, like becoming a scientist, or a pilot, or a mechanical engineer, or someone who worked in logistics for an electric vehicle company. You could do anything you want, just like Randy. Remember, he's a kid, you're a kid. But Randy sometimes wondered why he didn't always have good dreams if he just had a regular dream. So he asked his parents about this, and through their open lines of communication, they all talked about the fact that, well, Randy, you're very young. You don't have to know what you want to be when you grow up just right now. Just have some dreams. So Randy went back to bed that night thinking, all right, then I don't have to decide what I'm going to have, so how about a good dream? But one night, after a few nights of stressing and worrying about his dreams, Randy ended up having the craziest dream of his life. It started with Randy walking through the halls of his school, except his school was in the clouds, but it was safe. Everything was bouncy and cloudy, you know, because it was the clouds. And Randy went outside and saw, instead of a football or soccer or baseball field, there were just open fields of clouds. And instead of any cats or dogs or any land animals, all you could see were birds. Birds everywhere. Eagles, pigeons, wrens, even a red-breasted robin. The red-breasted robin came right up to Randy and said, "Hi, Randy. Welcome to your dream." Randy forgot that he was even in a dream. He thought he had just actually gone to school up in the clouds. Randy said hello back to the robin, and without knowing what would happen next, that robin had scooped up Randy onto their back and started flying around with Randy right on their back. Wow. Randy realized that this dream was wonderful. This was a space where Randy could finally see that anything could be possible if you just kind of let go in your imagination. That's what it was, wasn't it? Randy was finally letting his dream take him where any imagination could. Randy actually just woke up. Wow, that had been the craziest dream of their life. Randy decided to write down that dream too. In the morning at breakfast, he read aloud his dream to his parents. Everyone laughed at the robin picking up Randy and taking them around the playing fields, which were still the clouds in the sky. Randy's dad asked him, "Randy, what do you think you're going to dream about tonight?" Randy couldn't wait to get to sleep that night. After a full day of school and some chores, and tonight was tuna salad night for dinner. After all that, Randy got ready for bed and finally turned off their light and was asleep before you could finish the end of this sentence. Randy was having another crazy dream. Because that's the thing, kids. The next dream you have might be crazier than the dream you've had the night before. But this time, Randy's dream didn't seem to be crazy as in fun and light as before. This dream was feeling a little dark and a little scary. Uh-oh, there's some thunder. Ugh, lightning. What? But why is it happening in my room? Oh, and that's when Randy realized that they were in another dream. See, this was one of those nightmares, kids. They happen, but sometimes when you realize that you are in a dream, they don't seem so bad or scary now, do they? Randy woke up and, just like the night before, wrote down his dream. He read it to his parents, and his mom said, "Wow, Randy, you had a crazy fun dream, and now that was a nightmare." See, it happens sometimes. Both dreams, good and bad, can happen. Randy went to bed that night, having another dream, and woke up and wrote everything that happened in that wonderful dream down. And then the next night, Randy, before they knew it, had a whole journal, a diary full of dreams, funny and scary, good and bad. Sometimes with talking birds and talking beds, and other times just like they were out of an old black and white movie. You know, the kind that your grandparents or your great-grandparents used to watch when they were your age. Randy kept writing and writing down his dreams over the years. Before you knew it, Randy had graduated from college and gone to school to be a writer. You know, those folks that write down the stories and ideas and dreams that we have. All those years worrying about what their dreams would be. Would they be funny? Would they be scary? Would they happen while I'm awake? Would they happen while I'm asleep? Had kind of given Randy their dream job in life. To be a writer, a storyteller. And Randy started writing down the things that he knew best, his own dreams. Because, kids, all of us, you, me, every one of us have dreams. We have imaginations. It's nice to remember them. And if you forget them, you can always write them down, just like Randy did. Because before you know it, you might have your own dream journal and a book of stories and ideas that everyone wants to read, or maybe even see as a movie or TV show on their screens. But remember to check in with your parents for how many hours you can actually watch on those screens. Randy went to bed that night with a little smile on his face and couldn't wait to write down the next dream he would have in the morning. With one yawn, he was asleep. The end.